all started long before Vecna ever stepped into our nightmares, long before Hawkins fell apart, and long before the gates tore open. It began with a boy who felt out of place in his own family, a boy who didn't fear darkness, he welcomed it. Today, we're going deep into the moment everything changed. The moment Henry Creel discovered a world that would shape him into the most terrifying villain Stranger Things has ever seen. Henry Creel was never a normal kid. While most children spent their days playing outside or avoiding chores, Henry lived in his own quiet world. But this world wasn't peaceful. It was made of thoughts he couldn't explain, feelings he didn't understand, and powers he didn't know how to control. From the outside, the Creel family looked perfect. A happy father, a loving mother, and two children starting a new life in Hawkins. But the house they moved into didn't break Henry. Henry was already broken long before he stepped inside those walls. He didn't see the world the way others did. While kids feared spiders, Henry watched them with interest. While others followed rules, Henry questioned why those rules even existed. He felt something dark and heavy inside him, like he was carrying a secret no one else could see. And slowly, he learned how to use it. Henry's earliest powers were small and unpredictable. A flicker of a light here, a strange feeling of control there. His thoughts could push his surroundings, but only in short bursts. These abilities were nothing compared to what he would later become, but they were enough to show him he was different, special. And instead of being afraid, Henry leaned into it. He didn't just accept this part of himself. He embraced it, but his power also isolated him. He didn't connect with other kids, and he barely connected with his family. To him, people were confusing and exhausting. They lived simple lives, filled with routines, limits, and expectations that Henry had no interest in following. When he looked at the world, he saw a cycle he didn't want to be part of. He felt like an outsider in his own home, trapped in a life that wasn't built for him. The Creel house only made things worse. Once they moved in, Henry's powers grew stronger. He felt energy in the walls, as if something in the house responded to him. He began using his abilities more often, shaping small events to his will. The death of animals around the property wasn't random, it was Henry learning, experimenting, understanding how far he could push his mind. He didn't see this as wrong. To him, it was nature, life, death, balance. This strange behavior terrified his family, especially his mother, who felt something unnatural in their home. But Henry wasn't possessed, cursed, or influenced by the upside down yet. These powers came from him alone. They were raw, unfocused, and dangerous, but they were his. Eventually, Henry's actions turned deadly. He pushed his abilities too far, harming his own family and leaving his father traumatized. What happened inside that house was only the beginning of Henry's path toward darkness. But even then, his powers had limits. His abilities were strong, but not enough to create the monster we know as Vecna. He was powerful, but still human, still breakable. Everything changed the moment he entered Hawkins' lab. Dr. Brenner saw Henry not as a danger, but as an opportunity. Henry became Subject 01, the first experiment in a long chain that would later give rise to 11 and the other children. But Henry didn't want to be controlled. He wanted freedom, power, and a reality shaped by his will alone. And when he finally pushed back, fighting against Brenner's rules, he met the one person who could stop him. 11. In the battle between them, 11 didn't kill Henry. She sent him somewhere far more important. Somewhere that would take his power, twist it, reshape it, and feed it until he became unstoppable. She opened the door to the upside down and threw Henry inside. This was the moment Henry Creel's old life ended and the legend of Vecna began. Henry Creel didn't fall into the upside down like someone slipping through a door. He was violently thrown across dimensions, ripped from one reality and forced into another by 11's raw, chaotic power. One moment he was standing in the hallway of Hawkins' lab, angry, exhausted, determined to win. The next, he was swallowed by a blinding flash of energy and dragged into a world that wasn't meant for human life. A place that looked like Earth, but felt wrong in every possible way. When Henry hit the ground, the first thing he felt was pain, real physical pain that shot through every nerve in his body. The upside down was cold, empty, and strangely quiet. The air tasted metallic, like breathing in dust and electricity at the same time. The world around him looked familiar but twisted, as if someone had taken Hawkins and frozen it in a nightmare. The sky was an endless storm of dark clouds. The ground pulsed with life that wasn't alive. It was a place untouched by time, completely still and yet always moving. At first, Henry tried to stand, believing he could simply walk out of this place. But he quickly realized he wasn't in another room or another city. He was in another world, and this world was watching him. The Upside Down reacted to Henry the moment he arrived. It didn't welcome him, but it didn't destroy him either. It examined him, studied him like a living ecosystem, trying to understand what had entered its space. Henry felt something surrounding him, brushing against his mind, testing the edges of his thoughts. It wasn't a voice. It wasn't a creature. It was more like a presence, a cloud of awareness drifting through the air, curious and hungry. As he walked deeper into this strange landscape, Henry noticed something unsettling. The Upside Down seemed to change based on his emotions. When he felt fear, the ground beneath him twisted slightly. When he felt anger, the red lightning above the sky cracked louder. This place wasn't just alive, it was responsive. It moved with him, listened to him, almost as if it recognized the darkness inside him and wanted to reflect it back. Days and nights didn't exist in the Upside Down. Henry couldn't tell how long he had been wandering, but he felt himself slipping away from what he used to be. His clothes burned into his skin, his body reshaped by the strange particles floating in the air. Wounds from his fight with 11 refused to heal normally, instead merging with the environment around him. His skin darkened, stretched, and cracked. His veins glowed faintly with the same energy that pulsed through the ground. Henry wasn't just trapped in this dimension, he was being rewritten by it. But even as his body changed, his mind stayed sharp. Henry wasn't broken. He wasn't afraid. He was fascinated. Because for the first time in his life, he was somewhere that didn't reject him, somewhere that didn't judge him. The Upside Down was not a home, but it was a place where he could finally understand the full reach of his power. But the most important discovery came when he found the center of the strange presence he kept feeling. A vast, swirling cloud of dark particles floated silently above a cracked, dead landscape. It moved like smoke, but behaved like a living thing, shifting shapes, pulsing with thought and instinct. Henry didn't know it at the time, but he was standing in front of the raw form of what the world would later call the Mind Flayer. He didn't approach it out of fear or confusion, he approached it out of recognition. It was the same darkness he had always felt inside himself, wild, chaotic, untamed, and like him, it was alone. As Henry stepped closer, the particles reacted, swirling around him like a storm finding its eye. They didn't attack. They didn't flee. They circled him, studying him, connecting with him on a level deeper than language. In that moment, something important happened. The Upside Down didn't choose Henry. Henry chose it. This was the beginning of a bond that would reshape both of them. A moment where a broken human and a formless hive-mind found each other in a world without rules. And together, they were about to create something far more powerful than either one of them alone. When Henry stood before that swirling cloud of shadow particles, he didn't immediately understand what he was looking at. It wasn't a creature with teeth or claws. It wasn't a monster hiding in the dark. It was something far stranger, something without shape, without limits, without a physical form. It behaved like smoke, but it moved like a mind. Every particle drifted with purpose, as if it had a single thought running through thousands of tiny bodies. Henry didn't feel fear. Instead, he felt a calm he had never felt before. This world didn't resist him the way his old life did. Nothing here pushed back. Nothing here tried to cage him, control him, or label him. The shadow particles seemed to sense that he wasn't just a visitor. He was something they had been waiting for. As he walked closer, the cloud shifted, almost like it was breathing. The particles stretched out toward him, reaching for him, pulling around him like a slow-moving storm. Henry could feel them brushing against his skin, not physically, but mentally, tapping into his thoughts, testing the depth of his mind. It was the closest thing the Upside Down had to communication. And then it happened. Henry didn't hear a voice, but he felt an understanding. The particles were not a single creature, they were a hive mind, a collective intelligence spread across the entire dimension. They had no leader, no shape, no direction. They simply existed, waiting for something strong enough to control them, shape them, give them purpose. Henry realized he was that something. He focused his thoughts the way he had learned to do since childhood, sharp, cold, and controlled. The shadow particles responded instantly. They twisted into patterns, forming brief shapes before collapsing back into mist. Henry pushed harder, imagining something familiar, something that had stayed with him since he was a boy. A shape that represented control, order, and predatory perfection. And right there, floating in front of him, the swirling mass began to form the silhouette of a giant spider. This was the moment Henry Creel created the Mind Flayer. The particles didn't give him the idea. They didn't force a shape on him. He shaped them. Every movement of the cloud followed his thoughts, his memories, his vision. The spider was something Henry had always admired as a symbol of quiet power, a creature that built its own world, trapped others inside it, and stayed perfectly calm at the center of its web. The hive mind accepted Henry's design, took it in, and became it. And in that moment, Henry realized something extraordinary. He wasn't just manipulating this creature. He was becoming part of it. The particles began to wrap around him, sinking into his skin, merging with his nerves, linking directly to his brain. Henry didn't resist. He opened himself to it, letting the entire consciousness of the Upside Down flow through him. His thoughts expanded beyond his own body, stretching across the dead landscapes, through the air, into every corner of the dimension. For the first time in his life, Henry felt limitless. The shadows strengthened him, feeding him energy he never had before. His abilities, telekinesis, telepathy, mental manipulation stretched wider than he thought possible. The hive mind sharpened his focus, expanded his senses, and magnified the darkest parts of him. Henry wasn't gaining new power. He was unlocking the full potential of the power he already had, boosted by the energy of an entire dimension. But this connection came with a price. Henry's human body couldn't handle the constant surge. The particles began reshaping him, twisting his skin, burning through his veins, and rebuilding him into something that matched the darkness of his new mind. He felt the pain, the tearing, the transformation, but he welcomed it. Because he wasn't losing himself. He was shedding who he used to be. He was being reborn. From this fusion, a new identity formed. No longer Henry Creel, the strange boy. No longer Subject 001, the experiment. He became the master of the hive mind, the architect of the Upside Down, and the creator of the Mind Flayer's physical form. This was the moment Henry Creel stopped being human. And the moment Vecna began to rise. The transformation didn't happen all at once. Henry Creel didn't simply step into the Upside Down and rise as Vecna the next day. It was a slow, brutal evolution, one that tore apart what was left of his humanity and rebuilt him into a creature shaped by rage, control, and absolute purpose. The moment Henry connected with the shadow particles, the fusion triggered a chain reaction he couldn't stop even if he wanted to. Every second he spent in the Upside Down pulled him deeper into its energy until the barrier between himself and the dimension began to dissolve. The hive mind inside the particles filled Henry with more mental force than he had ever felt. His thoughts multiplied, stretching far beyond a single brain. His consciousness could now slip through the fog, seep into the ground, travel through the air like electricity. He saw the entire Upside Down at once, every corner of it. Every pulse, every shift. It was like becoming a god inside a dead world. Power that had once come to him in short bursts now flowed constantly through his nerves. But that power came with a cost. Henry's physical body began to reject the intensity. His skin blistered, cracked, and peeled as the energy coursed through him. His bones twisted under pressure. The particles drilled into his flesh like thousands of tiny threads stitching themselves into him. The pain wasn't normal pain, it was deeper, as if his entire form was being rewritten from the inside out. But Henry didn't scream. He didn't fight it. He accepted it because he understood something. The transformation wasn't destroying him. It was refining him. The upside down shaped him the way a blacksmith shapes metal by burning away weaknesses until only strength remains. As the hive-mind merged with Henry, everything about him warped into a new, terrifying design. His skin hardened into a rough, vine-like texture. Long, dark tendrils wrapped around his limbs, binding to him like a second nervous system. His eyes sank deep, glowing faintly with the same strange light that ran through every creature in the upside down. Even his fingers stretched unnaturally, forming the claw-like hands he would later use to kill across dimensions. Henry's transformation wasn't random, it followed the blueprint of his mind. His darkest thoughts shaped his new body. His desire for order gave him the rigid, branch-like structure covering his frame. His hunger for control molded the tendrils around him like living roots. His fascination with death and quietness made his new form silent and predatory. The boy who once studied spiders became the monster who created webs between worlds. But the biggest change happened not in his body, but in his purpose. Before the upside down, Henry was a boy angry at the world. Inside the upside down, he became something much more defined. He saw himself not just as an outsider, but as the rightful architect of a new reality. The hive-mind gave him clarity. With his expanded senses, he understood how fragile the human world truly was. He saw every fear, every weakness, every flaw. And in that clarity, Henry crafted a mission. He would shape the real world the same way he shaped the Mind Flayer through force and control. He didn't plan to invade immediately. He studied. He learned the rules of this dark dimension. He discovered that time didn't move normally here. That memories carried more weight. That physical objects were echoes. The upside down wasn't finished, it was waiting for someone to finish it. Henry believed he was that someone. When he finally rose from the cracked round, no longer human, no longer Henry, the transformation was complete. The boy had died. The experiment had vanished. What stood in his place was a being built from both the darkest parts of human nature and the limitless energy of the upside down. This was Vecna, not a servant of the Mind Flayer, but its creator, its master, and the mastermind behind every shadow that would later fall on Hawkins. And now, empowered beyond anything he had ever imagined, Vecna was ready to begin writing the story he had waited his whole life to tell, a story of destruction, revenge, and the birth of a new world carved from the remains of the old one.